Welcome to the Growth Concept Podcast. I'm your host, Keone Upton. My growth has been from having real, meaningful conversations with people. Hence why my mission for this podcast is to empower growth through real conversations. In today's episode, we're diving into the deep conversation on what is a healthy relationship and how to stay clear of the whack modern dating culture in this day and age. I'm joined by Kylie Feller, a clinical counselor and level 3 IFS therapist who's turned her own healing journey into a mission to guide others towards love and connection. We'll unpack what it truly means to have a healthy relationship and how your unresolved trauma may be holding you back. Kylie offers a refreshing perspective on what's possible when we do the inner work. Whether you're in a relationship, looking for a relationship, or you're here just to learn and do that inner work, this episode is for you. That's enough from me. Let's get into it. Enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and share some of my knowledge on dating.
Awesome. Thank you. Kylie, what is it you do and why do you do it?
Yeah, so I'm a counselor. I'm from British Columbia, Canada. I'm a counselor because I experienced a lot of trauma growing up. And so I knew that, I felt like psychology was going to have the answers for me at a pretty young age. Right. And I really went into the profession for myself. And I think a lot of human beings do a lot of things for ourselves, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And as I've kind of journeyed through kind of figuring out like how to heal, how to understand trauma, I now get to help other people do that.
With obviously going through the trauma as a younger individual, did that lead you to the therapy counseling that you do now, or is there other external factors into that equation that led you where you are?
Pretty much trauma. So, and it sucks because in formal education, I was in formal education for about 8 years, 5 years from undergrad in psychology, 3 years for my master's, and none of it will teach you how to heal trauma. And it's really dangerous because that's often what the heart of a lot of people's suffering. And trauma is not just like when we go to war or natural disasters or like major abuse. It's really these wounds that we pick up throughout life that we experience, maybe caregivers not attuning to us. We grew up in families where emotions aren't talked about. We have, legacies of families going through war and picking up different survival strategies. And so trauma can sometimes be how we interpret the world around us, that if my needs aren't being met, then I feel like I must not be worthy of my needs being met.
Right, okay.
And so trauma isn't what happens to you. It's what the beliefs that you create about why things are happening. And so it's much more complex. And I think now they're starting to recognize complex trauma, which is a disconnection from self. And so when I talk about healing trauma, it's, we get disconnected from self through these experiences. And then how do we come back to ourself? How do we recover ourselves?
Yeah, trauma is something I've been hearing a lot, whether it's in podcasts, movies, I don't know, a song even. But I've always wondered, as someone who, I don't think I've experienced it or anything, like I haven't put that like word to mind connection. So what exactly is trauma? Because you're saying that it's not all physical abuse, wars, PTSD, stuff like that. Yeah. It's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, it can be a lot deeper. And again, when they're kind of talking a little bit more about complex trauma, it's, growing up in a home where maybe we don't feel fully seen, and
what do you
even
mean by that? As in like
if I get angry as a child, I'm sent to my room. Or if I get really sad, that's not allowed in this house. Stop crying. Okay. And so it's like you're made to feel like there's something wrong with you for how you feel or what you're feeling. And that isn't going to cause a wound in everybody, but for some people it will. And that's why trauma can be subjective. Why siblings can have very different experiences of their parents is like, how much do they internalize it? That like, if I get angry, it's not that anger isn't bad. It's also that I lose love if I'm angry. And
Gotcha.
So if you look at, you might understand like people who have inner critics or people-pleasing parts or caretakers. That is all coming from places of protection. That's often coming because sometimes we experience something that felt overwhelming and a part of us went, never again do I want you to feel that way. And so that creates a wound.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. What mission are you on with your therapy? Is it to help people overcome the trauma for a more meaningful relationship? Do you mind explaining that to me?
Yeah. And so often the biggest traumas that people experience are through relationships, right? And so how we experience our relationships growing up is often going to be mirrored later in our adult relationships, right? So some of the work that I do and what's helped me is like, again, to connect with myself, the relationship to myself, to like feeling really like whole and alive, the ability to feel like all emotions, to feel quite present in the world, and then being able to feel safe with other people, to be like my authentic self with other people. And so as my journey has kind of like unfolded, and like one of the beautiful things about if you experience a lot of trauma is the journey of finding yourself again is like a really beautiful path. And sometimes if it world didn't shake you so much, you don't realize you need to go on that path, and it can take a while to see it. And so I get to help other people come back to themselves. And so some people might recognize that they have trauma. Other people might not, but they've always just felt disconnected from themselves, from other people, from their authenticity, from their path. They're stuck in a survival mode. Like our culture really promotes that burnout. You know, our nervous systems are up. So I don't just help people with trauma, but I really help people move from like surviving to thriving. And I know people always say that, but it really is like, you know, it's almost like too cliche to say. But, you know, and relationships are a big part of that. And so in my master's, I did my thesis in like online dating. So as I realized, well, I was starting to date again for the first time. And the advice out there and like social media advice on dating is like so horrible. And a lot of the pop psychology is so horrible. So I had to really start using my clinical background to start to understand what was happening in dating. Why was it so hard? Why were people saying it's just like the worst thing ever? Why are people continuously like following patterns of like being attracted to people that really don't match where they are in life, or continuing to kind of like, you know, just feeling so alone, so abandoned, so rejected. So yeah, I don't know if I'm quite answering your question. I feel like I'm bouncing around a lot, but
that's awesome because we'll touch on later on this episode about online dating, the wild west it brings, and how it's portrayed, and how that affects culture and people's outlook on dating in general. With the path you are on now, if you had to pinpoint a single pivotal point in your journey that made you realize, yes, therapy's for me, I want to be a therapist to help others? Was it, we spoke about that trauma, how that had a massive impact on making that decision, but was that the only pivotal moment you had to choose your career?
Well, when I was about 11 years old, I found a psychology textbook and had made my mind up to go into psychology.
11, wow.
And then when I was just starting my master's, I'm not sure how old I was. It must have been like 7 years ago. I heard a podcast with Richard Swartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems. And he wrote a really beautiful book called You Are the One You Have Been Waiting For. And my whole body just like lit up. And I was like, this is it. And so that was when I found the approach. Over the last like 7-8 years, I have like dedicated pretty much all of my learning to that model.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I want to talk about the trauma you experienced growing up. and how that affected you personally and your relationships. So now we know what trauma is, but how did that come up in your relationships, whether it was at the start or now?
Yeah. So I think I've experienced a lot more trauma than most people. You know, at the age of 4, my dad had passed away. And that really had a big impact, I think, growing up on my relationships. And at the age of 4, I also felt like it was my fault my dad had died. And so I really held that for a long time, which created a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of trauma. Like, children think that they have so much more power than they actually do. And unfortunately, my mom ended up dating somebody who had a psychotic break and almost killed us all. And
psychotic break, what does that mean, sorry?
Have you heard of schizophrenia?
Yes.
So when somebody completely flips and loses this reality. And so that, then growing up, experiencing that and almost dying, and then having a mom who had experienced that, and she was 17 when she had me. So when this happened, she was in her early 20s. So I really grew up not having anybody to go to. It was very much taking a lot of responsibility on feeling very alone in that. And as I've done IFS, I can look at my system and the parts inside of me and how much they protected me in those moments. And I never really was alone, even though I've really felt alone. And in relationships, then it creates, I have an anxious attachment, but I also can be quite avoidant. I'm very independent in how I process or how I work through things. And so that, I think a lot of people don't think about when you grow up. For me, it was quite obvious. I was okay, I'm going to have to this is a lot to go through. I knew that at a young age. For other people growing up, it might be a much more subtle experience of not being seen or feeling alone. But when your parents when one of them passes away, or your parents are really struggling with their mental health, that causes often a lot of wounds inside that you can't, it's hard to trust, I think, other people.
Do you ever have clients come to you and they have no idea what their trauma is or something holding them down, and then going through that process, they're okay, that makes sense. They have one of those moments. Was that kind of the same with you, with your process, or did you know all along?
I knew. What I didn't understand was how my system had protected me. So I had a part that really stepped in to kind of numb me, but not numb in a way that feels uncomfortable. It almost feels like a hug. It just held my system through those experiences. So when I went through things that were really scary, I didn't actually feel scared. I felt really, really safe and really, really held through everything. But when I made it through, that feeling didn't leave. And what happened is I felt safe, but I couldn't feel bad. I couldn't feel sad. I couldn't feel angry. And I couldn't feel really excited. I couldn't feel really connected. It just kind of kept me in a nice neutral zone. And I tried everything to get rid of that part. I went to Peru and did ayahuasca. I went and tried all these different types of therapies. I tried to push through it. I did extreme exercise. And then when I did IFS, I realized that part was working so hard to keep me safe. And that if it hadn't have done that, I don't think I would have made it through school. I wouldn't have been able to really make it through a lot of my life and all of my achievements. And so the aha moments I've had is the parts of you that you might try to get rid of or see as being in the way are actually working so hard to keep you safe and to keep you alive. So a lot of my aha moments have just been realizing the amount of love that's always been in my system and the amount of protection, even when it doesn't quite make sense when you first look at it.
Did you originally see that as a weakness with having so much love in your system?
Well, I didn't realize that, when you have a part that's trying to numb you don't think you're just you think it's in the way. Why won't you let me feel? Why are you doing this? And, parts too that can freeze you, parts that just want to watch TV or just want to look at your phone, or parts that want to eat food, or parts that want to socially isolate, not recognizing that like underneath it, there's like a deep protection for you, that they're like actually trying to help you.
And IFS helped you through that way more effectively than any other counseling you went through.
Yeah, because if you think about, I don't know if you know about other models, a lot of times they try to, like cognitive behavioral therapy, like will try to kind of argue with those parts of yourself. So you've got like an inner critic or like a negative part or depression part. You try to like logically kind of push it away or counter it, but that'll create, like, instead of trying to understand, like, what is your positive intention? Like, what are you afraid would happen to me if you didn't make me depressed, or you didn't make me anxious, or you didn't make me avoidant, and these parts have these really like beautiful positive intentions. They're not like trying to stop us from having a good life. They're trying to help us survive.
What is IFS? You've brought it up a few times, but I've never heard of this kind of therapy before. Do you mind explaining that to me?
Yeah, internal family systems is the idea that we have multiplicity of the mind, multiple parts. Like a part of me wants to do this, another part of me wants to do that. Like a part of me really wants to come with my friends, another part of me really wants to stay home. A part of me really wants to eat healthy, another part of me wants to eat this cake. We have this like polarization inside of us, right? And so IFS really normalizes that we're not just this one mind. We have many parts. Some of them really argue. We can have like inner critics, people pleasers, caretakers, angry parts, shutdown parts. And with IFS, we don't just intellectually understand that, but we see these parts of us as almost like sub-personalities that you can interact with. So in IFS, say somebody's like, I'm struggling with anxiety. I'll be like, okay, let's go inside and connect with your anxiety. So I'll get them to find it in or around their body or in their head. And I'm like, oh, I feel it on my chest. And I'll be like, okay, well, just focus there. What else do you notice? It's like, oh, there's like a lot of like energy there. Sometimes there's an image that shows up. Like I always see my parts. Sometimes it's like little cartoon characters. And I'll be like, how do you feel towards your anxiety? I hate it. Well, does it make sense a part hates it? Yes. See if that part would give some space. And when the part that hates it gives space, oftentimes when you check in again, there's more curiosity. Why is that part so anxious? And that's coming from what we call in IFS your true self. So underneath everything at the center of us is a part that isn't really a part. It's like this healing essence. It's compassionate, it's calm, it's curious. And with IFS, we want to reconnect parts to that like internal essence. And when parts feel understood and seen, they can kind of release those survival strategies that we had to pick up in life and gain back like the gifts and the qualities they were meant to bring into our life.
That makes sense. When you were 4, you were saying that your dad passed away and it felt like it was your fault, which is at age 4, that is extremely heavy for a young person to suffer through. On top of that, your near-death experience. How did IFS help you with pushing forward with that? Because you were saying that it identifies 2 different sides, the hot and cold side, and meeting it in the middle. Am I kind of wording that right? And acknowledging that?
Yeah, kind of. So in IFS, I've gone... there's many parts of me that have developed to protect me kind of from that 3 and 4-year-olds, that like she feels alone, that she feels like she has the power to like almost like wreck somebody's life, or like she just held so much responsibility, and so in IFS, I can go back to her. So I can go back into those moments when she picked up those belief systems, and with my heart open, when she feels my energy, and that compassion, it's like you can listen and witness. It's not about trying to like fix or change, but so she really feels like I get why she felt that way. And then a lot of times in IFS, what's really beautiful is we can actually work with our ancestors. So a lot in the healing for her is my dad's kind of energy has come in to really let her know that it was like never her fault. I can tell her that, but it depends on people's belief systems, but it's really magical to have him kind of come in and be able to give that corrective experience that it was never her fault. and then she starts to feel more secure in herself. I start to feel more secure in myself. So even though that happened a really long time ago, if I didn't go back and heal her, parts of me are still going to operate from those beliefs and those fears, even in the present moment. So in IFS, we need to go back to these like pivotal moments where we created these wounds, these beliefs that we're bad, or that we did something bad, or that we're really alone, the world is dangerous, and help to like recorrect those so that I can actually show up more present in my life now.
Wow, that's so beautiful. The fact, just that process. I've never heard of that way of overcoming that trauma. Do you think the key to overcoming that deep down trauma which people are going through, whether it's a personal trauma, professional trauma in the work field, or just relationships in general, revisiting that moment is very important in that overcoming that trauma stage?
It is, but you only want to go back there if you can go back there to help heal it.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of trauma therapists get it wrong, is people will go to therapy and they tell their story and nothing shifts. They tell their story, maybe it even gets worse. They start feeling even like more of that fear, more of that. And they might know intellectually that they shouldn't feel that, but they can't stop it. And so with IFS, there's something super magical about self-energy, about getting parts to unblend. A lot of times when I'm sitting with a part, I try to see if there's any openness in my heart, even just a sliver. And it's like this magical energy that you can, it is like the core of like self-regulation, and you can feel it. And when a part touches that energy, it's like this update. It's like this instantly like kind of knowing that we're safe now, that like we're seen, and all of the everything that younger part had to hold on to, because we couldn't have carried that consciously really and like lived life, or like all the fears or all the pain. But when they realize that you made it through, they can start to release it. And so it is really important to go back to these pivotal moments or these like beliefs to help understand them and heal them. But you want to make sure you go back there with the right tools.
The right intentions and the right guidance too, because I'm sure, is it kind of like a form of meditation? That's the way I'm kind of visualizing it.
It does feel a lot like that. Some people will compare it to a little bit to a hypnotherapy. Like it can feel like that, a bit of that state. You're definitely like you're wandering into the subconscious mind. It's like going down the rabbit hole a little bit. It reminds me of like Alice in Wonderland when you're in there. Sometimes it's like a very creative imagination. If you look back to some of the origins of psychology, like Carl Jung, I don't know if you've heard of him, and like archetypes. So IFS is a lot like that too, recognizing the different kind of archetypes or parts that we have inside of our psyche.
Right. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what is a healthy relationship.
I think a healthy relationship really starts with yourself. And that's kind of like what I've been talking about, is like if you went through experiences that made you feel like you are unworthy, that you are unlovable, and then you go out into the world and you try and find somebody that is going to save you from that, that's going to like fix that for you, that's going to like complete you, that like your well-being, your worth is now in somebody else's hands. It is not going to work very well. And I think in a lot of our culture messages is that like, you complete me. I need to find my soulmate. I need to there's like this searching externally, and all of that's lovely. But if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, if you don't love and understand every part of you, and that's like a big, or at least on that journey of like openness, of like seeing and being open to starting to have self-compassion and to like see what's happening inside of you, your relationships will not be very healthy. And so I guess I'm kind of explaining what an unhealthy relationship is, and that healing is that ability to do that U-turn, to be able to understand our own system, to develop a secure attachment inside of ourselves. And so we can really love other people for just who they are, rather than what they're going to do for us.
Gotcha, that makes sense. Because it's good distinguishing both sides. How a healthy relationship is being happy with yourself, loving yourself first, How does one know this? How did you know this for yourself, for example? How did you know, okay, I love myself for where I am.
Mm-hmm.
I just happen to meet someone who aligns with these values and goals.
Yeah, and I think it's a process. Like, I don't think you have to be there. Like, I think this is a continual thing to be able to have a healthy relationship. But if, you realize that if you enter a relationship and then if that other person's in a bad mood or they can't show up for you and you lose your sense of self or well-being, it doesn't matter how amazing that other person is and like how much you guys are in alignment if you can't start to like see what's happening inside of you and taking kind of responsibility for that. And I think that's a key one. And then, because again, if we have a lot of these wounds, what happens as well is, and I noticed this even with some of my younger parts or my trauma, is that they were continuously attracted to people that were going to leave. It's like I was replaying the trauma of my childhood, that whoever I like is going to leave, or whoever I love is going to leave. And the different people that I have met that might be emotionally unavailable, I think are absolutely beautiful people. But I didn't have an awareness of the pattern that I was continuing to play out in my life. So those relationships triggered a lot of the healing that I needed to do. So I almost wouldn't call them unhealthy. I think that they woke me up. Like, I'm so grateful for some of those early experiences that instead of living a narrative thing, everybody out here is so horrible, or like falling into a victim mode, I could start to look at, why am I continually getting into relationships with people that, might be scared of commitment? Why am I scared of asking the questions that I need to ask? Why am I afraid of asking for clarity? And it was like, instead of blaming them for where they were in life, I needed to take responsibility of why I kept kind of walking down a similar path.
I've heard on, top dating advice for online 101 to get someone you act not interested, and all these things like that come up. Complete rubbish, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You were saying that you were going back to people who were going to leave, which in a way kind of intertwines with acting like you're interested but you're not, or I'll say but no game, if that makes sense. Why do you think people revisit or look for qualities in people which actually hurts them? Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of answers to that, but how I see it is these, especially talking about like these younger parts of us, they don't want to be stuck in the feelings that they're feeling or the experiences that they're in. But what happens is we end up doing what's called like traumatic reenactment, as though we almost like set up a similar stage to how we originally got injured, and we'll look for people who have that similar quality, not consciously. We're not consciously doing this. It's like this behind the scenes kind of thing that's getting played out. And it's like, this person who has similar traits to the person that originally caused my attachment injury, if I can get them to love me, it means I'm lovable. And so you'll see with the dating advice, there is a lot of game playing. It's like you're waiting to be chosen. If this person chooses me, it means that I'm worthy and good. Not recognizing that you're asking the person to choose you that isn't in a place to be able to do that. But it's like we want a redo. Like we want a corrective experience. But if you keep picking the same players, you're just going to keep getting the same play.
I was looking at stats on dating apps. 50% of couples that are dating right now actually have met via a dating app. And a staggering 40% of marriages these days end in divorce. These are two very high stats. The divorce rate is all-time highs for Australia and globally at this time, as well as the people meeting on dating apps. Do you believe there is a relation between these people meeting on dating apps and divorce rates increasing?
I think that dating apps are like a tool of the culture, I guess. I think that they might be showing something that's like deeper and more underlying. Like I think like a lot of people don't understand again, like I've been talking about, like trauma, like feeling unworthy, feeling not good enough. And a lot of people enter a relationship thinking this person's going to save me. And then they don't. And so people try a couple different things. I'm going to try to change this person, try to make them into somebody who I think I need to fix me. And when that doesn't work, they go, there must be something wrong with me, you know, and then they sit with that for long enough, but then that doesn't feel very good. So they go, I think I just need to find somebody new. That person wasn't my soulmate. And so then they go back out again and they try. And then we have the convenience of dating apps of like, there's something green on the other side. And this, like, I can sit on my couch and I can look and I can fall into this like fantasy that this next person is going to be the one that will save me, you know, instead of people kind of working on their relationships of like looking at the parts of them. I think so many of us don't have the tools or the insight to see like what's actually happening in my relationship. We put so much blame on the other person rather than taking accountability for our own wounds. And so I think that's really contributing to a lot of like the divorce rate. And I think, again, like dating apps, it contributes, I think, to like this, you know, helping people kind of wander or try and find a solution outside of their relationship. But it also can be like, you know, that's where a lot of people are finding their relationships too.
Do you think 2025 dating culture is very negative? It probably would be different in Canada with cultural differences, but
it's quite similar.
Yeah, still the Western world.
Yeah, still
screwed up either way.
Yeah.
What are your views on the culture of dating in this day and age?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a lot of like game playing, and even like the apps are kind of set up like games. A little bit is too, and a lot of the dating advice, you know, like don't text first, or like I hate the one thing, if they wanted to, they would. People are just so much more complex than that. And I just like, I look on like my TikTok sometimes and like the advice that they have out there. It's just so much game playing rather than like authenticity. And the one book, I think it's top in Canada on Amazon anyways, is like Why Men Love Bitches. And it's like Doormat to Dream Girl. And it teaches like women how to act like very dependent, like don't cook, like burn popcorn, kind of like playing this game, right? Instead of like looking at like, is this person somebody that you would like to be in a relationship with? Like, can this person communicate? Can they like, do they have clarity? And I think there's these people that put on these like masks, like, I don't feel very good in who I am right now, and I feel like I'm going to be rejected and I'm not really lovable. Like, they might not be consciously aware of those wounds, so they're like searching for like, how do I get the guy, or how do I get the girl? How do I like put on this mask so that I feel good enough or worthy? And we're not really seeing each other. We're not really like sitting down in front of somebody and be like, who is this human being? Like, what is it that they're passionate about? Does it align with me? What are your values? What are your goals? And because so many of us have wounds, you know, I just see two children sitting at a table, no matter what age they are, just like trying to find somebody that sees them as being worthy and lovable, but because they don't feel it themselves, they can't show up as themselves.
That's a very good point. Looking at the traditional culture of dating, relationships, marriage, it's changed a lot recently. I've thought to myself, my grandparents, my parents, mum and dad, they were very traditional. Typically, the male is the bread, brings home the coin or the bread, and the wife stays home and cooks. My parents, on the other hand, that still has a little bit of elements, but it's far less strong and structured to my grandparents, for example. And now, as I'm getting older, I'm starting to see completely different proportional differences in relationship dynamics. Traditional, should we be more traditional? Should we be less traditional? I don't know what to do. What do we do? Because I think, I don't know, in my opinion, as a young male growing up, do I be Mr. Tough Guy, or do I be more of my emotional side? It's very confusing. What's your outlook on that?
Mm-hmm. I think what feels most authentic for you, what feels right in your body, what feels like, how do you want to show up in the world? How do you want people to be with you? You know, and again, it's like putting those masks on. Who do I need to be for somebody to like me? You know, and we do have a lot of cultural kind of like norms that have existed, and some of that is crumbling. And I really think that we should just come back to authenticity. And we have a lot of parts though. So sometimes we might have that tough guy, or that we might have the emotional. That might be both. They might be true. And what I would be curious about is if those parts had any fears around if they didn't show up that way, what would happen? Right? Because then are we coming from a place of fear? Are we coming from a place of like, this is me? Right? And that's a bit of like an internal journey, because a lot of times you don't even, people like, I feel like I'm pretending, but I don't even know who I am. What am I? What am I pretending? So it's really, I feel like in relationships is an inner journey and it's an outer journey, and it takes vulnerability, and I think a lot of curiosity with people, and seeking a lot of clarity, and getting really curious about what we're afraid would happen if we did show up as our authentic self.
I think authenticity is such an important point for navigating and adventuring into different relationships, different roles, for example. Yeah. With being your authentic self, how does someone align with their authentic self to the relationship? Is there a specific process that you go through to identify authentic self? Oh, you've been putting on a facade for X amount of years. You now have to be yourself, because I imagine that'd be very hard for someone to take in.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit of that. It depends on how disconnected you feel from yourself. You know, how, and I think a lot of it, the core is how worthy do I feel as a human being, and how lovable, the messaging that we got when we're younger, because the thing is we are all worthy and we are all lovable, even if we don't feel like it. That is a belief. It's not a reality or a truth. And so if you're entering the dating world and you don't feel worthy and lovable, that is what you need to start exploring, is the parts of you that don't feel that, and the parts of you that are trying to protect you from feeling that. Because until that's kind of like understood and seen, it's going to be really hard to show up as yourself. You're probably going to have parts that are very much scanning the other person, try to see like, what did they want? What did they need? And I think this is where people get into a lot of trouble in this world, is, people who get called like gaslighters or love bombers. They have parts that don't feel like they are good enough on their own. And so they will try to show up how the other person, what they think they want, rather than who they really are, because they don't feel like they could get it otherwise, which gets you into a lot of trouble. Because as much as people like to think they're good at pretending, we're not actually that good at pretending.
It will show at some stage.
Exactly. That's why I tell people, like, take like 3 to 6 months to see who somebody really is, because people, it's not even like they might be consciously trying it. It's just like their parts might not really know how to show up authentically. And it might take a little bit to start to see who they really are, if their behaviors and their words are in alignment. And if they aren't, it's not like they're a bad person. It just means that they might need to go and do some healing work before they can really be in a healthy relationship.
Like you were saying with this whole relationship process, it doesn't happen like that. And I think in a world where everything's very hurried, in my opinion, everything's, I just want to meet that person. We'll just quickly swipe left, right, or start that business, make money and retire. Like it's all that quick culture as well, which something I've started to see. With going through that, would you call it a reflection period of self-reflection?
Yeah, I think it's like self-reflection and getting really curious. Like, who is this other person in front of me? Right? Because so many times, I have parts that can do it. They meet somebody and they will project who they think that other person is really quickly. You know, some people will go on like a couple dates and be like, oh my God, this person. It's like, you can't actually know who somebody is in a couple of days, but we've projected a bunch of stuff onto this person, right? And we've really read into their words and their behaviors without maybe even seeking kind of clarity on what they want, and where they're going. And I think, you know, I've gotten in trouble with that, like just reading into people's behaviors without really asking, like, do you want a committed relationship? Do you, you know, like, are we on the same page? You know, because they just show up so fully. They're like, oh no, actually I don't. So, you know, we want to ask people these questions. And I think a lot of us, again, if we are trying to find somebody else to make us feel good, sitting in the dating stage can feel really uncomfortable and really triggering sometimes, especially if people are more anxious. Sitting in the unknown for a lot of people doesn't feel super good. But if you can do it, if you can truly be okay with the unknown and can feel secure in yourself, you can feel true freedom in life.
100%. So you think asking the right questions for yourself before going into a relationship and to the other person is so crucial to a healthy relationship, whether it's meeting them online or via another way?
Yeah, like if you know what you really want, you know, and some people might not be ready in a relationship. Like I know, like, you know, my little brother is young and he's like, I really like dating, but I'm not ready to be in a serious relationship. Yeah. So when he goes on dates, he lets people know, hey, I like doing really romantic things, but I'm not ready for a serious relationship. Are you okay with that? You know, and so that's where he is. And I don't think a lot of guys or people are that honest with other people.
I think you have to be. That's so important.
Yeah. And then it's, you know, there's nothing wrong with not being ready to have a serious relationship. But if you know that you want that and you're going on dates with people, you should be asking them that before 100%. You get attached to them. So I think getting really clear on what you want, because I think like when I was really young in my 20s, I almost had parts that were like scared to say that I wanted a relationship, and like as if that would scare somebody away. But you can't scare somebody away if that's not what they want. Like, you know, and I think like that's just getting clarity, and I think a lot of times we get scared because we think what other people's behaviors or actions mean something about us. And that's where like being rejected, I ask a lot of clients, what does rejection mean to you? And they're like, it means I'm unworthy. Well, then it's going to be really, really hard to date and like ask those questions if somebody doesn't give you the response that you want, if you think that means something bad about you.
Yeah, rejection's one of those things I've definitely acknowledged rejection a lot more. I think it's absolutely amazing. I like embrace it all I can. Like, I'm like, well, if you're gonna like reject me or someone, the way I see it is a redirection into someone you're meant to meet, meant to go for that coffee with, etc. Do you kind of view rejection as the same way? I took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say it really is just redirection. It's, you know, 100%. But again, that's where doing this inner work is so helpful and so important, because if you're carrying those wounds, you're going to make dating is going to be excruciating, and it's going to take even longer because you won't ask the right questions. You're going to keep playing out previous traumas. It's just like, and then it just keeps repeating. And that's where I think a lot of people get like so stuck in dating, is they don't feel secure in themselves. Yeah, very good point. To sum up this whole conversation, what are 3 pieces of guidance or points you want to raise that make a successful, thriving relationship in this day and age?
3 of them. You know, I think doing that inner work, really like knowing, especially if you don't know your attachment style, find that out if you want. I can even send you a link if you'd like for an attachment assessment.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'll attach it to the
yeah. It's a fantastic one that I send to a lot of my clients, and it'll kind of like spit out your top, like it gives you like a chart of your attachment style. So if you've ever had a relationship, you'll have a chunk of secure, but then you want to see what the next biggest one is. If it's anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, because that is going to show you when you get triggered, how you're going to respond in relationships. And it's so important to see that, because we often think that's who we are, but it's actually a survival response. It's not really who you are. And so knowing that is so helpful when you're dating, to know it for yourself and to know it for the people that you're dating, to see if they've done that work or they know how they kind of like respond in relationships. I think identifying if you have trauma, if you grew up in a household where you didn't feel seen or you didn't feel loved, where you experience a lot of shame, I think seeking support and healing that, I really suggest like internal family systems. You can seek out somebody who has been trained in it, but you can also do a lot of it on your own. Yeah. Which is really great.
Authenticity is pretty high up there, I think.
Yeah. And so that's kind of that way back is kind of like with IFS. I think it's, if you want to know yourself, if you want to have intimacy and authenticity with another human being, you have to have it with yourself. You have to know and love yourself. And it's a journey that you take. And I think with dating, what I see it as is an experiment that it helps me grow. So rather than entering the dating world and being like, I've got to find my person, it's like, I'm going to find all the pieces of me that still need to be loved. And, in that process, I'm going to become like more me, more whole, which is going to make it easier for me to actually find somebody who really aligns with me in this life. So kind of taking the pressure off dating and really making it about me and my healing and my growth and finding myself and my voice, rather than it is about the end kind of finding somebody else.
Kylie, thank you so much. I got a couple of last questions for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you could go back to your younger self with the knowledge and wisdom you have now, what would you tell your younger self, and why?
I would say go and find an IFS therapist as soon as possible. That's the reason I do what I do, is just trying to share the resources with people that helped me heal, so that it doesn't take as long as it did for me.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Why would you tell yourself that?
I went to a lot of other therapists when I was younger that caused more trauma. And so if I would have been given this tool when I was like a teenager, if I like just even younger than that, like it just would have saved me like so much of my life. I'm so grateful for like the journey that I've had to take, but like if I would have had that, like, I wouldn't have had to waste so much time.
Yeah, I feel that. Kylie, the last guest I had on this podcast left a question for you, not knowing what your profession is, what you do, or anything. The question was, what is the greatest piece of advice that you were given that you live by?
Greatest piece of advice. I don't know if it was like so much given to me, but like that I have learned. And it is kind of like what we've been talking about, like that authenticity piece. There is Gabor Mate. That comes a lot from his work. I don't know if you've heard of him. He is a psychologist actually a medical doctor in Canada. And he's done some really beautiful work on healing trauma. And it is that like, that authenticity is a human need. It's the thing that we lose. So I think when I heard him talk about that, it really stuck kind of in my system of like not losing myself for other people. And we might not have it all healed, but the ability to like share, even to be authentic, is even if we feel broken, even if we have parts that are still very wounded, to be able to like share that with other people means you're being authentic too.
Very well said. Where can people connect with you if they want to know more about what you do, interested in your coaching programs or the education that comes with it?
Yeah, so just on my website, so just kyliefeller.com, I have, I train coaches and counselors in internal family systems. I offer kind of like continual workshops. I offer individual work. So if IFS is something you're like, oh wow, I feel like that could like really help me. I do individual work with people, and I do group work, and I have an internal family systems daily parts journal as well on Amazon.
Wow.
That kind of introduces you to it and helps you. And soon, probably next year, I will have a book on IFS and dating. So, if you're interested, you can go to my website. You can follow me on social media as well, Kylie Feller IFS. And love to hear if people had comments or questions from our talk today. Encourage anybody to reach out and ask as well.
Awesome. All links are in the show notes below. Thank you so much, Kylie. What question do you want to leave the next guest, not knowing who they are, what their profession is, that I'm going to ask?
I know I created one, but now I don't have it in front of me. I know I sat with that. Do I have to come up with another one?
You can do it.
Yeah, maybe I'll keep it in, since we're talking about relationships and dating. What is kind of what is something that you learned about yourself in your previous relationship that has a big impact on you today?
Well said. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kylie. I feel this conversation is so important, and myself, I'm looking forward for editing this episode, just solidifying all the information in my head. Thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me, Kylie. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, what an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Kylie. And I don't know about you, but this conversation left me with a deeper appreciation for the power of self-awareness in relationships. From unpacking myths about love to calling out the emotional chaos of dating apps, Kylie reminded me that healing starts within. And when you do that inner work, we attract healthier relationships. Thank you. If you're feeling inspired or you just want to go deeper, connect with Kylie. All links are in the show notes below. And before we go, don't miss any future episodes on the growth concept. Follow this podcast below, like and share this episode. It helps the show grow, which means I can bring more guests on and keep continuing the production of this podcast. And in return, I will do my absolute best to keep improving this podcast every single day and keep bringing the guests you want on for our growth. Thank you so much for tuning in. Your support means the absolute world to me. And if you have any questions or suggestions on future episodes, I would love to hear them. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email's in the show notes below, and DM me on all social media platforms. Until next time, keep growing, and I look forward to seeing you on this next episode. See ya.